The Nintendo 64 is a system with one of the most unique libraries of video games ever. Even far after its release, the 64 hasn't been matched with its sheer quantity of risk-takers and daring new concepts. Nowadays, the N64 is a system with many more haters than supporters, which I can definitely see. Many of these games are just straight up crap, but you can't deny that it's at least a creative crap, with artistic intent. Recently, I beat one of these cult classic games, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about it. Glover is a puzzle platformer masterminded by the Oliver twins, a duo known for Dizzy the Egg and working on the Burger King games. The original 1998 version was released on N64 and PC, while a year later we saw a port to the Sony PlayStation. This video will cover the N64 original, as that's the one I played. The PS1 version is apparently really different with a heavily altered story, graphics, and physics, so it might be interested for a later review, but it's out of the scope of this video. So let's pop the game in and get started. So starting a save file for the first time, you get this intro cutscene where you are introduced to the main conflict. There is this fat, whimsical wizard in his castle making a mysterious stew which accidentally turns evil. There's a minor explosion which turns the wizard into stone and he falls through the floor into the pit of death that everyone has in their home. This sends his gloves flying off, one landing in the stew and the other flying out the window. The glove that lands on the ground is our main protagonist, Glover. All of a sudden the sky turns red and the crystals that keep the world in order fall off the castle. With some quick thinking, Glover turns all the crystals into balls to protect them from shattering. Back inside the castle, the glove that landed in the stew has turned into the evil Cross-Stitch, the main antagonist. And after this, the game sets you free to stop Cross-Stitch and recover all the crystals. What a great first showing. These characters are so cartoony and exaggerated, it's a nice style. Now this is the only actual story cutscene, the rest of the storytelling is through the environment itself. Whenever returning gems to the castle, you may notice that the sky gets a little less red and foggy, with the music becoming more peaceful and clear along with it. It's a neat way of visually telling a simple story that gets the point across without needless cutscenes or dialogue. Anyway, now that we have control of Glover, let's start this journey. The first thing you may notice is the weirdly complex controls. Glover has your standard moveset. He can double jump, as you might expect, but there's also a ground pound and a side flip. He's not bad to control. The movement is fine enough, and not often did I have a problem with Glover on his own. The tough part comes when you interact with the ball. Glover will immediately cling to it, and this unlocks so many different forms of movement. You can bounce the ball, slap the ball, throw the ball, stand on top of the ball, and transform it into different forms. This ball is the reason why many people who play this game absolutely despise it. The controls, physics, and different moves are very complex compared to your standard platformer. The ball is a bit unwieldy and takes a bit to stop and start, and standing on top of it reverses the controls for some reason, which makes going on water pretty annoying. This creates a steep initial learning curve where many players will struggle to grasp the way the ball moves and how you interact with it. However, Glover knows this and includes a tutorial stage to guide you into the more advanced maneuvers, as well as a little hat called Mr. Tip that tells you exactly how some things are done. But even with the tutorial, the controls still take a few whirls to get used to. Even after getting past that steep initial learning curve, the controls are still a pain. The physics will sometimes just have a mind of their own and randomly break in ways hard to describe. Sometimes moves will activate twice, the ball will just dismount from you and start having a mind of its own. The bounce was really delayed in some cases, and so much more. But my biggest frustration is the fact that this ball is basically tied to your lives. If your ball pops, life gone. If it rolls out of the map, life gone. It's just so frustrating because you have to add in that extra bit of precision of trying to play your moves as safely as possible so that you don't have to break this little snowflake. And when the aforementioned dismounting or extra moves happen, this ball will almost always roll or bounce into danger, which is out of your control. If the ball wasn't invincible or had its own life bar, most of the control baggage would be solved because I wouldn't have to worry about playing it safe constantly. But it's such a unique control scheme that I dealt with the baggage and actually learned the controls the best I could and dealt with the issues. It poses quite the challenge I actually haven't seen in any other game before, which makes it all the more rewarding to finally finish a level. Overall, the play control is frustrating but incredibly unique. Now, the level design is definitely something. It's just really odd in most cases. There's heavy emphasis on puzzles, which makes sense, but also tons of large jumps, which just do not work with this engine. The way the ball bounces does not make precise platforming easy. It's hard to judge how far or high you will go, but outside of the sections that the developers obviously put like 2 seconds of thought into, I had a pretty great time. The puzzles are not challenging in the slightest, but they do have some clever tricks from time to time, and each world's new gimmick separates every world from the last. The carnival world uses carnival attractions, the space world has low gravity, the prehistoric world has tons of lava, etc., etc. But even stage-to-stage gimmicks like snow in the first prehistoric prehistoric level really keep you on your toes. I do wish, however, that some of these level gimmicks like the platforms in Space 1 and this prehistoric level were nerfed to fit the controls a little bit better, and the amount of obstacles that insta-kill the ball were toned down, but now I'm just nitpicking. If you can fight with the controls enough, then these levels are a pretty fun time. And in every world, there's also a bonus stage to unlock. These are Garib cards, the main collectibles in the game. Collecting all of them in a particular world will unlock a bonus stage, none of which were thought out in the slightest. Even the first one, a Frogger knockoff, controls even worse than the main game. The hops are unpredictable, the hitboxes suck, and getting all the Garibs will probably kill you. The rest are not as challenging, but just as dumb, such as shooting a cannon or trying to escape a room of rising water. They're tedious and truly test your patience. But the bosses are definitely much more interesting. They wildly fluctuate in difficulty. Most of the bosses are your standard hit with the ball 3 times or ground pound affair, but there are a few that aren't that simple. First being this monkey in the pirate world, which you have to stand and hit while he's hanging from the branch. If you try to hit him on the ground, he runs away and starts attacking. This could have been explained a little better if there's maybe a little cue at the start or something that leads you to it. The final boss was another that I weirdly had trouble with. You have to shoot the ball with these missiles and these little enemies on the ground. These controls are actually horrendous. It's impossible to aim for crap, and I constantly miss and lost so many lives. But the worst of them all is the boss in the Fortress of Fear, Frankenstein's monster. Anyway, this boss is absolutely horrendous to clear. You have to get on these copper platforms and ground pound to make a staircase up to the button that ends the only problem is that it is nearly impossible to do consistently. When you actually get onto a platform, the ball can just roll off, especially when ground pounding. The monster will come over occasionally and electrocute the platform, which pops the ball and kills you. Also, while in this phase, the monster itself becomes electrified, which if you left your ball on the ground to make a ladder, his Texas-sized hitbox will pop it. I wasn't even on the same, time zone. It's just so infuriating when you have nowhere to run after an electrocution or when the ball rolls off and you soft lock yourself. The developers apparently noticed this after the fact because the platforms take up the whole wall in the PS1 version, but we're not going to talk about that port. Overall, the bosses are all either poorly choreographed, the easiest possible thing, or impossible, so they're not the highlight of the game for me. Now, the visuals for an N64 game, I must say, look pretty great. The game has this overly cartoony look, which separates it from the rest of the N64 library. I go as far as say some parts look more impressive than something like Mario 64. The enemy designs are all super creative and exaggerated, such as the bouncy guy in the carnival, the chicken, the hopping dynamite, or just the giant butter knives that walk, standard day in the universe. But then there's stuff like this gray bowling ball with the most devious smile that just knocks you off your ball. Alright, look at my stream. What is that? What is that? I enjoyed the variety and mystery of what would appear next because they're almost impossible to predict. But on the topic of enemies, they are really unfair sometimes. There are some like this chicken who are completely unkillable without potions, and the game never tells you this. Mr. Tip always letting me down in the worst spots, man. And some others are simply there just to mess with you. The aforementioned devious sphere only exists to knock you off the ball, and the dynamite explodes with such a large range that either the ball will be blown to the stratosphere, it will instantly blow up, or Glover will clip through the wall and be unable to catch the ball before it falls off the edge. It's really tedious. But besides for these cherry-picked examples, the enemies don't really pose that much of a threat unless they knock the ball around, in which case, run. Now the music is pretty hit or miss. Some parts of the soundtrack sound great, like the deep, moody tones of Atlantis. Or the surprisingly catchy opening theme and menu. But then there's the prehistoric music and the first Pirate World theme, and yeah, I don't know what stuff the composer was smoking while making this, but most of it isn't half bad for this era. And that about wraps up Glover. Beating the final boss grants you the final crystal, which you can use to finally go save the king who defeats Cross-Stitch once and for all, bringing peace to the kingdom. Glover is honestly one of the wackiest, sometimes rage-inducing, and weirdly fun games I've ever played. It has quite a unique control scheme that I know I have spent a while complaining about how frustrating it is, but when you're not trying to platform or intricately dodge enemies or spikes, they still function well enough and provide an experience unmatched in any other game I've played. I know that I have a lot of issues with this game, but I couldn't help but have a grand old time playing it, and I can't place why. It's fun to play despite all of its flaws, and I believe that this is a game that everyone should try out in their life for that reason. We will probably never get anything like it again. We could have, because there was a Glover 2 in development, but it got canceled shortly after Hasbro realized they ordered too much Glover and they were burnt with unsold copies. And the recent efforts to revive and finish the game have gone absolutely nowhere. We may never see Glover again. If you're looking for a new game with an interesting gimmick, then maybe pick this game up. But if you do want to go through with playing this, I recommend the N64 original over the PS1 version and the modern Steam and console releases. The PS1 version is a whole different beast that has some quality of life changes, but the physics are much worse and most of the music and levels are not the same. And the modern versions are, in fact, based on the N64 original, but they've mangled it in the transition process. Many environments don't render correctly, the sound effects are all out of whack, there are new bugs like some levels will crash your game or animations being frozen in place. It's a mess, but it is playable if you just want to experience the game. The N64 game can be found for dirt cheap if you have an N64, and it's $20 on Steam, which is a little absurd for the glitches of problems in this port. If you can get it on sale, the Steam version is a fine purchase, so please, whether you have a PC, N64, or one of the modern consoles, please play Glover. I promise it will have an impact on you one way or another. But then again, it does have no sex scenes, so really it must be a 0 out of 10.